All right, guys. Very happy to have my next guest today, Andy Petrella, as on the Ravit Show today. Andy is an entrepreneur with a mathematics and distributed data background in the data community. Andy is known as an early evangelist of Apache Spark and the Spark Notebook creator. He is an O'Reilly author of distributed data science, data lineage, uh, essentials, data governance, and machine learning model monitoring. So, a lot out there. Obviously, we'll be talking around his upcoming book about his brand Kensu.io. And he's also the co founder and CEO of Kensu.io, a data observability solution that comes with a specific method, data observability driven development, DDOD as DODD, as we'll be discussing a lot around that. So we'll also discuss about his journey, data observability, and a specific method that I just mentioned, which is DODD. We'll be talking around that. Okay, just a quick reminder to everyone who is joining in. We'll be giving away one annual subscription of 365 Data Science. So a big thank you to our sponsors, to the show sponsor. I will quickly just show what you need to do. Is just type in hashtag 365 Data Science in the comment section, and you'll enter the raffle. I can see already Aditi has typed in there. Shruti Shrestha has typed in. So, guys, feel free to type in 365 Data Science in the chat, and we'll be announcing the winners by end of the show. And one lucky winner gets a chance to win an annual subscription of 365 Data Science. All right, without any further ado, let's call our guest, Andy Petrella. Hey, Andy, welcome to the Ravit Show. How are you?
Hey, Ravit, thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm doing really well. Thank you. It's very fantastic time to be here.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I was just letting folks know about your brand, Kensu.io. I really like your jacket there. And I was also mentioning about DODD, about data observability. And it's something, obviously, which is I can say it's becoming huge day by day. As far
Mhm.
as the information that I'm learning about data observability, it's very interesting. So, would love to hear from you about data observability. But before that, can we know a little more about you? So, feel free to introduce yourself, Andy.
Cool. Yeah, so, well, I am as you said, actually, I'm the CEO and founder of Kensu, right? And I'm coming from a technical background, so I have a degree in mathematics and computer science, but I spend most of my time in geospatial, starting in the early 2000s.
Mm,
I would have been called nowadays a data engineer sometimes and a data scientist the other times, at a time where everything was done in Java, right? So quite some time ago. So before, of course, everything that you know nowadays is almost replacing everything that I was capable of doing back then. But
right.
at some point, yeah, I switched career. In the early 2000s, I discovered something called Spark that
Mm,
nowadays in our ecosystem everybody knows, right? So I remember starting compiling Spark 0.05 and starting understanding what the heck is this thing, and then fell in love with distributed computing. So that's why at some point I created the Spark Notebook, which I mean saved my life at some point because I was doing Scala and Spark from the
mm,
console. So that was becoming a mess very quickly. So I created a Spy Notebook, and that kicked out quite a lot of things like advisory in the Silicon Valley, and
mm,
um, and well, I mean, yeah, this is basically me. And nowadays I'm running Kensu, which is dedicated to one thing that I have discovered when I was working with my community and with the
mm,
different project I was on, is this kind of a problem that is kind of arising nowadays about we feel like in the data team that we're pulling fires down every day. Like there is this kind of feeling that is rising more and more, and I wanted to fix this, and this is why I created Kensu in a way, and that's what I love to talk about today, of course.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Andy. And I know for a fact that you're very close to data observability. So, for our audience, obviously, to start with, can you tell us more about what is data observability?
So there are a lot of things have been told around data observability, but
Exactly.
in a way, for me, it's one of those intersections between IT and data management. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very close because we are going down to the earth, right? And talking about what the heck we can observe about data, because data
Mm.
observability is a capability that we provide at the system level in order to have people outside of the system understanding what is going on, right? So there is a pipeline, and you have an observer that is capable of understanding if there is changes need to be applied on the pipeline, updates needs to be applied on the pipeline, or or fixing some issues because the data is not coming out
Right.
accurately from the applications. Um, yeah, in a way, actually, so data observability is meant to give some kind of confidence that
Mm-hmm.
the constraints from the user perspective of the data are actually being satisfied, because users are using the data. They have some constraints about the data they're going to use now and in an ongoing fashion. So they want to be sure that the constraints they are building while using it is maintained, so that there is nothing that is becoming odd at some point in time.
Right.
Um, Sometimes it's good to take an example, right? So imagine that
Definitely.
I'm an engineer, as I've been in my life, right? So producing some data in data warehouse, right? Let's say the data warehouse is a relational database. Okay, so I'm producing some data there. Let's say the customer data, and I have three different users of my data. One
Mm-hmm.
will be creating some report about the customers, and one of the important information is the address. So the address must not be often null, because otherwise the report is odd, and then we don't have the right segments. It's fishy. From the other
Exactly.
users, they want to do some machine learning, so they have to have a regular data set with a plenty of observation in order to not, learn some noise, of course. And the other will create some ongoing recommendation engine, right? So they need to have fresh data in order to make sure that the recommendation will be accurate. And actually, the three users will have a different view on the data, and they want their constraints to be respected at any point in time.
Mm.
And if they are not respected anymore, they want to be notified about it, and they want to be able to act on the system if that is happening. So this is what observability can aim to, actually, to me.
Okay,
I hope it makes sense to
that's
everyone.
no, I think that that's a very clear explanation, and that also brings me to another question around data observability. So, at this moment, how would you say which are the industries which have already started using data observability according to you, Andy? Or it's still in that early stage, or the industries have actually, started using it to another level? What would you say?
So from the current users, right, from the data engineer and data teams, right? So
Yeah.
if they have started, I would say most probably they have some things in places that they
Yeah.
don't that they wouldn't call data observability yet, but there are components that would actually fit into data observability. I'm talking about a few checks. If you consume some data, you check that the data you receive contains a field about the last name, right?
Mm.
Doing this kind of checks is getting closer to data observability, because the application which is consuming the data checks some things and checks some facts about the data, right? And
Right.
take decision upon certain events, right? So I would say yes, but not fully.
Not fully. Right. So yeah, okay. Sounds great. Okay, we have a few folks. Let's greet them. George is here. Hey George, nice to see you. Kate is here and she's looking forward to hearing more about data observability. Thanks, Kate. And for those who haven't joined Data Kate Circle yet, reach out to Kate and just join her community. It's fantastic. Akshay Toshniwal is here. Hi, Akshay. Christine is here from Chicago. Hi, Christine. Thanks for joining. Manisha is here. Thanks, Manisha, for joining. Let's learn more about data observability and about your company. We already have a question from Aditi, but let's take it after this one.
Okay.
So, why start a data observability company, Andy? What was the reason behind that?
Um, Well, I've been an engineer. I've been a data engineer. I've been advocating and been advising a lot of company growing data teams. And at some point, I was also driving this community of the Spark Notebook, which reached around 20,000 people, right? Working every day with data. And at some point, I was figuring out that something was happening, like the same question was coming again and again and again. Okay,
Hmm.
working with Spark, working with Notebook is fantastic. We can do so many things so quickly. We even have so many tools that allow us to accelerate the learning path or whatsoever. But how the heck do you manage production, right?
Right.
How do manage this kind of visibility?
Mm-hmm.
And and of course, we I mean, back then I was thinking about different ways to do it, and we introduced some best practices in different projects where I was involved and also working in, right? And at some point I had to choose, whether I continue advising and implementing this kind of best practices, subset there, a subset there, a subset there as an advisor, or creating something that will support actually this method that I was coming to, right?
Hmm.
In order to create, of course, some awareness about this kind of best practices that can be useful for the data, and of course, working on the platform that will support it. In a way, for me, it was initially much more important to bring the method, the culture about data
Right.
observability before the platform, right? The platform is the tool, right? So, but the tool we know doesn't
Exactly.
do anything, right? So, if there is something, not something that is there to sparkle the interest and everything.
Hmm. Sounds interesting. Okay. Let's quickly take this question from Aditi. How is data observability different from data monitoring? Interesting.
Yeah. So to me, data monitoring is, it can be thought as a component of data observability, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, data monitoring, which is monitoring the data, right? So that's pretty clear what it means to
Yeah.
do. Um, so it provides a strong focus on monitoring the data itself, right? And
Hmm.
not observing the way, for me, yeah, the way it is being used and consumed, right? And produced
Exactly.
even, right? So you can think about data monitoring, in my opinion, as something that will check constantly that the data looks fine, right? And monitor the data
Hmm.
itself, right? However, it's not there to give insights about what are the impacts of something going fishy in the data on the system, right? In order to anticipate and to avoid big problems. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
observability is like a level on top, right? In
Got
order
it.
to create more visibility on how the data is being used. And I see that Arshad is providing his inputs too about it.
Yeah, exactly. Arshad says, data does okay. He has a question actually. Does data observability help in edge analytics for detecting and stopping machine failure in manufacturing setup, Industry 4.0?
Yeah, definitely. Because because data observability, so again, so it gives the external viewer a capability to understand an internal system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, the internal system is the edge analytics, right? So it happens in the edge, right? So it can be on a mobile, whatever, right? And uh, and the way an application is actually being controlled is by receiving logs and information about the way the application is working, right?
Right.
And this is go moving, towards DOD itself, right? So basically, data observability is really about receiving logs of information about how the data is being used. In this case, the edge, let's say a smartphone, which is actually either creating some prediction or learning from the data, can
Mm-hmm.
actually send or create some logs about its own usage so that an external observer can understand how the different edges applications are behaving, right?
Okay.
And because again, we take a look at it from the perspective of the usage and not from the data only.
Hmm.
I
I
hope that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. I think that is super insightful, Andy. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, before we move on to next question by George, which is very interesting, I would still, want to ask you quickly about Kensu and what are you guys exactly doing at Kensu for our audience?
Which one is it? Sorry.
About Kensu, about your brand.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the brand is really built, as I said, so it's really coming from passion, from really this vision that I have, that I we need to absolutely to help data teams to support their activity and not fall
Yeah.
in the trap of continually putting fire down. So Kensu is a structure for me to create this vision, right? So there is a mission which is to ensure that all the different people working on data are trusting what they deliver in production at some point, right?
Right.
So I put something in production, right? Pretty much like an application is deployed after CI/CD, etc., and then it's deployed in production. In order
Hmm.
to sleep on both ears during night, you have something in place that will monitor how the application is behaving, right? I want this vision to also come into the data by using the right method, which is one pillar of the company, and the second one is really about providing the right tooling in order to support this method, which is that.
Okay, that's amazing. So, what I've done is I've shared the link with the audience in the chat. In what I can see is there's a demo. They can actually request a demo. So this is superb. Um, so for those who want to learn more about it, can actually visit the site and request a demo too. And is
Yeah.
there a link to join your community as well?
So it's going to actually we created. So we're going to open soon
Yeah,
a Slack channel with everything
fantastic.
in there. So nowadays the community is actually spending their effort on our open source libraries, because we
Yeah.
have plenty of open source agents
Hmm.
that will support DOD, right? But then we're moving to the next step, which is creating this community around the Slack channel. But I will publish. We can keep posted the people when this is going to be live.
Okay, that's amazing. A quick question from Kate here, and I had this question as well. How did you come up with the name Kensu?
Oh yeah, it's a good one. Thanks, Kate. So Kensu is actually composed of two words.
Hmm.
So there is Ken, and in Scottish, Ken means no, right? Do you ken this? Can it's like do you know this, right? Do you ken this, right? It's
Okay,
really
no.
about knowledge and understanding things, right? And Su comes from sustainability, right? Because initially, when I saw these teams becoming scary about what has been going in production and so forth, right? It was raising some kind of anxiety, as I said, right? Actually, it was
Right.
because at some point you lose the knowledge about what is going on in production, right? And if you
Exactly.
want to recover this knowledge, you have to put your hands on in the fire and trying to see, what data is becoming wrong, what data is not actually being published whatsoever. And this is not sustainable, right? Because at some point you lose your mind. And that's
Right.
how they came up with the word knowledge in a sustainable fashion about the data, Kensu.
Wow,
So that's
very
what we would
thoughtful.
say Kensu or Kensa normally.
Can say. Okay, that's very thoughtful, Andy. To know sustainability, which is super cool. Okay, let's take a few questions from the audience as well. I know I was waiting for this question, and George's question is here. Would you say that the this helps elevate data downtime?
Um, so when we're talking about data downtime, so I call this also catastrophe, right? So
Right.
catastrophe is something that is going nuts because of the data, right? So dedicated to data.
Exactly.
Um, um, so yes, in a way, it can support that, right? And this is not the only goal, right? Because the data using data observability, you understand the system using the data, right? So
Hmm.
in a way, you can also understand what it is actually doing, right? That means that it generates some documentation, some knowledge about the application itself, which can be shared, right?
Right.
So in a way, data observability is not only a defense, it's a way to communicate around what is being performed with data, what is data used for, right, etc. Because to me, a data has no definition. It only takes a definition when it's being used. So I have an IDT card, right? It can be used in so different fashion, right? It's only my ID information, but
Mhm.
depending who is looking at it, right, it will define what that is.
Okay, that is great information, Andy. Thanks for that. Amazing question, George. Thanks for that question. Okay, let's take this question from Bharat. Bharat is asking, what is the difference between data observability and something like dashboards getting updated in real time? Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, data observability, it's a system, right? So basically, it's a multiple components thing, right? And the dashboard, which is updating in real time, and I assume that the dashboard would show different data set with different
Hmm.
metrics, etc., about the health, right? And there are multiple, and that would be updated in real time. So
Right.
the thing is, how do you get the information in this dashboard first, right?
Exactly.
So what is publishing to this dashboard in real time, which is good. Real time is the word that I like the most in here, because what
Hmm.
is real time? Is it in real time you check what the data is, or do you check in real time how the data is behaving in production or elsewhere, right? Actually,
Hmm.
the real timeness is more linked to the data usage and production than the data itself, because again, data is inert, so it doesn't live, it has no life, right? It's just something static. You can print it in a sheet of paper if you want, and this is still
Right.
data, right? It's only when you use it that there is a notion of time,
Hmm.
and that comes in, right? So basically, what is the difference between a data observability and a dashboard, right? First, the data observability will allow this dashboard to be constructed, because you're going to pull out all the information. Actually, not pulling out. Actually, the system is delivering all the information that the dashboard would actually show, right?
Yeah.
And a dashboard is like the visual, right? That's one thing. Second, we don't want to look. Imagine Google. Google, they have 16 billion data sets.
Hmm.
Imagine the size of the dashboard, right?
Yeah.
So that would be insane, right? So you need at least 8 billion people looking at two data sets in real time, right? So that means
Exactly.
basically the whole world would be stuck at looking at those. So
True.
in a way, data observability is also about inferring information, providing concepts, features that will notify people on the right time instead of looking in the dashboard in a way, right? But I mean, to your point, Bharat, what I'm just saying is that it's an extension of the report, right? So the dashboarding,
Hmm.
where you want to learn from what the different graphs are doing.
Okay, that's fantastic information, and it gives a lot around the dashboard system and data observability being a part of it. So, yes, makes sense. And let's move on a bit and let's get into obviously what Kenshu does. I know for a fact that Kenshu does a lot of data observability according to a specific method, and that method is called DDOD.
Yeah.
Yes, DODD, which is data observability driven development. So, what is it exactly? Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so we say DOD, right, for
Dot.
simplicity, right? So
Yeah.
so DOD, actually, it's like a combination of everything I just said, right? DOD is providing a capability to data practitioners, right,
Yeah.
to include, while they're writing the data applications, information about what they do,
Right.
about what the application is doing with the data, right? So you write the pipeline, right? During the time that you write the pipeline, or you use this kind of tools that allow your pipeline to be defined using tools, visual tools, you can
Right.
include there, right? Information about what kind of data are linked to which data, what data is being consumed, what the data is being produced, and some profiling information about the data that you are reading and producing, right?
Right.
It's really from the application. When you think about the application, when you think about the business case that you're solving with the application, that you can introduce, data observability,
Right.
right? And and in a way, it's very close to application observability. Before we jump in the on stage, we were talking about the application observability, and
Yeah.
there is a strong parallel with these kind of things. So if you think about Datadog and so on, right? How do they do? They are consuming information directly coming from the application that they want to actually observe, right? which
Hmm.
makes sense because you need to observe it from the outside world, right?
Exactly.
And because in data the data is inert again, so I'm coming again and again to this thing, right? The data cannot tell you anything. The data per se on a sheet of paper, it cannot say anything about itself or its stability whatsoever. You need to take a look at the applications and understanding how these things are being collaborating in order to understand if the data will match this or this or these constraints, right?
Exactly.
So in a way, the data observability driven development is an extension to application observability by
Hmm.
adding specific information about the data. Basically, the context of usage, which is, let's say, the Python script of the Spark application, whatever. It's
Okay.
super important, this part. So this is a very important part of UDAD because when there is a problem with data, what do we fix? We cannot fix the data, right? So we cannot log into the database and start tapping data in here, right? So it's not possible,
Exactly.
right? We always have to fix either the data which is producing the data or consuming the data.
Hmm.
And if there is no way you can fix the data before it's reaching your point, because the data is coming, I don't know, from Facebook and it's getting dirty for whatever reason, so you have no hands on, right? The only thing you have to do is to stop your application, right?
Got
Again,
it.
it's always linked to
Hmm.
an application, so that's why you need to have information about how the data is used from the application perspective.
Hmm.
Second, in DOD, what is important is to be synchronized. That
Okay.
means that you see, right? So basically, if I'm consuming again a data warehouse view, right? And I'm expecting to receive no more than 10% of null values in the age column, right? Well, I care about, and I'm consuming the data between age 25 and 65, right? The
Hmm.
ratio is really important, having not too many null values in this range, because otherwise my consumption will be failing, right? So I want to be aware at the point where I'm consuming the data that the data I'm taking is not too empty, so that I can
Hmm.
do some good predictions, right? So there is a
Got it.
synchronization between what I'm expecting and what I'm checking in a way.
Hmm.
So, and there is a third principle beside context and synchronization, right? Which is continuous validation, right? When you do DOD, and maybe we can come back to this later, right?
Yeah.
When you use DOD, which is a kind of method, right, that allow you to have this information from the application, you leverage this work that you do during your application writing in production. I'm, I'm um, I'm taking an example, like if I'm checking that my data cannot be less than 10,000 rows, I can do it in a test, but I can do it also in production.
Got it. Yeah. I think this is great information. Looks like Dot, seems to integrate data validation all along the process. Can this method be seen as a continuity of CI/CD? What do you think, Andy?
Um, so contextualization, which is the third principle, because these are really
Hmm.
principles. If you apply contextual observability, synchronous observability, and then the continuous validation enabled, right, you have reached DOD. And continuous validation, so we know all CI/CD. I mean, obviously, so continuous integration, continuous deployment, this was key in order to scale our IT ambition, right? Otherwise, we would
Right.
have to do so many manual things, and then writing tests, I mean, doing tests manually, this is not possible anymore at some point, right? Um, and nowadays, in the CI/CD, we try to squeeze, and this is really interesting. We try to squeeze also data testing,
Hmm.
right? Application, and you test the data is actually correct, right? So you take some sample data and you test your application that is producing data that you were expecting.
Okay.
This is all cool, right? So that means that during the CI/CD, you can actually validate that your application is producing the data the way you want it, right?
Hmm.
But in production, what happens in production? What if at some point you wrote a test that is checking that based on the column you get first name, last name, etc., you produce a full name information. But what if in production at some point you don't get this data anymore, right? Even if the tests are
True.
actually checking it, it's hard. slash impossible to test all the different cases that will happen in production, right? That
Exactly.
means that continuous validation allow you to write the test if you want in production.
Hmm.
Pretty much what has been done for service mesh, where you are when you connect to a service that you're producing a service that will produce recommendation, but you need to connect to a authentication system. You check
Hmm.
the authentication system is actually there, right? And then you log an error if not. This is the same concept that is actually allowed with DODD, but for data in production.
Okay, this is fantastic information, Andy. Thanks a lot. We do have a few questions. Let's jump on and let's take these questions. These are very interesting ones. Okay, first one's from Manisha. Data is everywhere. How do you suggest we focus on good data and make the most of it?
Um, it's a good one, right? So focusing on good data, it's hard for me to say what is good data and what is bad data. Again, I
Exactly.
mean, especially when you're a data scientist, your role is to make dirty data nice and to explore, whatever
True.
data you have in order to do something meaningful with it, right? At some point, we have to cope with it. Um, so data has certain level of quality, of course, and but I understand the point, right? So how do we find the data that will cause the lesser pain in order to reach a
Exactly.
certain level of quality of output? Um, so how do I suggest that we focus on the good data? Well, um, imagine that you know exactly how the different data are being consumed and produced, right?
Hmm.
And all the data being produced by the different application, let's say, are also being tracked in a way that we know what is the level, what are the different metrics about the data being produced. So you have a system that produces the data and you have information about how the data is actually behaving. And also you have a system that is also capable of telling you what are the applications that are actually producing also good data based on this data set, right? So there is a
Hmm.
sequence that is taking form, right? Actually, based on this information, you know what data is actually going to help you solving a business case, for instance, because it may have been used already by some other use cases that are actually working fine. If you see a data set which is connected, or you see the number of consumption is reducing over time because you see that there are some alerts being sent about it, then you know that you don't have to you cannot really use it.
Right.
Although if you really want it, you know that you can contact the producer of the data and you know exactly who it is, in order to maybe fix it or to find a solution to come up with something that is more stable.
Hmm. Interesting. And you can always say, Andy, that folks can use a Kensu platform if they want good data and observe the right data. So
Yeah, of
yes.
course. I mean, now there is the good practice, of course, that needs to be respected, and then of course there is a platform that can tell you score automatically the quality of the usage and the productions, ultimately create a combined score around the data itself.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. An interesting question from Bala Gopal. Hey, can you talk through data lineage capacity? Who owns what data at a given time, which is critical transparency for compliance regulations?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So lineage is definitely part of the data observability,
Yeah.
right? But why? Why do we have this there, right? Actually, so when I thought about the kind of information I needed myself, in order to observe my system, lineage was part of it. I wanted to
Hmm.
understand what is connected to what, basically. What can influence another system, pretty much like you do with service meshes. So the lineage is mainly there in order to, for me, do root cause analysis, understanding if I have a problem in this application because the data doesn't seem right, I can use the lineage to figure out where is the problem. I might miss some data, I might miss a column, there is a new column, whatever, right? And this is in order to analyze and find a root cause of your problem. So the
Hmm.
lineage is really this, so it connects the different dots. Data observability, right, is not meant, in my opinion, to deal with compliance regulations per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless the application is willing to check some facts about regulations. So
Okay.
imagine that I'm doing a segmentation algorithm, right? So random. So I'm segmenting my population, right? And I know that in my application I cannot use the biometric information because it has been forbidden. I'm in Belgium, by the way, so GDPR has been written like literally 50 kilometers away from me. So GDPR says, okay, so you can do whatever data you want, but it has to be somehow validated and you have to be aware of what you're doing. In this
Right.
case, I have been told, so there is a constraint between me producing the result and the DPO, whoever is willing me to not use the data. So I know the constraints. I'm checking in my application that not doing it. I'm I'm installing in my code a barrier of a check that says I cannot use this kind of information, for instance, right?
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
GDPR.
Yeah.
You.
Exactly, Balagopal. Nice one, nice question, Balagopal. And quick one taken from Christine as well. But before we take this question, obviously, just want to remind folks that we are giving away annual subscription of 365 Data Science. What they need to do is just type in hashtag 365 Data Science in the chat, and we already have 10 entries. We will do something fancy and select one of the winners by end of the show. Okay, let's take Christine's question here. How does the system or method of data observability avoid pitfalls and potential bias related to subjective interpretation?
Um, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
So subjective interpretation. So we have to define what that is. It's going to be tough, right? So what is interesting is the bias here, right? Let's say that there is a. This is typical, right? So
Mhm.
insurance, life. You use the gender part. You know, the gender in your policy creation, right? But but it can create some trouble because then there is a bias towards one or the other. Okay, so you need to detect it for regulation purpose or only because you may create a segment that will not be so accurate and you cannot explain anymore, right? So
Right.
how data observability can actually help in there, right? Actually, the way I've done it is that when I was consuming data, I
Mm-hmm.
was consuming certain fields in order to put it into my learning, right? So let's say I'm putting into something I don't understand anymore, random forest, because I want to have something quick, right?
Got it.
Actually, for categorical values, for instance, or things like this, or ordinal values, I was producing the distribution of my data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the distribution of data was continually logged. There is a metric that says, okay, this is the distribution of the data you're consuming, right? So that if I see at some point that it is being skewed, right, I know that the bias may be formed not by me but by algorithm that I'm going to use later on, right? So this is the
Right.
problem of skewness. So you can publish automatically the skewness of your data if you want also, which is a specific metric that is interesting. So what is nice is that actually, you might not think everything at the first time, right? But as a data engineer, especially, you might not even think about this first, right? But
Mm.
when there is an issue like this that is happening, right? The business user will tell you, oh, actually, I don't know why, but actually, at the moment, I'm receiving bias data, so skewed data. What can we do, right? Of course, the
Right.
data engineer has no information, so he may not even understand what is going on there, right? But it will actually catch this information and publish the skewness as part of a metric, which seems to be interesting for the consumer in the code. So that is being published all the time. I
Got it.
hope. I mean, this is one example, of course, with the skewness, but basically this can be repeated. So by finding the right indicator in
Yeah.
order to match a certain agreement that exists between a producer and a consumer.
Okay. That is amazing. Let's talk more about the future plans here, Andy. First of all, thanks for that question, Christine. It obviously brought another side for us. So yeah, talking about the future, wanted to learn more about what's next for Kensu and where do you see data observability going? And that I think that is one of the questions from our
Yeah, I
audience as
saw in
well.
2 or 3 years. Yes, Aditi.
Yes.
Um, well, for me, it's as simple as it must be taught at university, right? To data scientists, data engineers, because I mean, it's like testing. Testing is
Hmm.
being taught at university, right, or high school, whatever, right, or college. So because it has gained so much importance, it's a best practice nowadays that you have to create some tests in order to create some confidence about what you're going to put in production and being used by people in the wild, right? So to me, data observability has to be defined in a certain way that everybody can use it, right? That is not to
Right.
be somehow linked to a specific tool and so forth, right? This is why I'm talking
Exactly.
about DODD in a way, because it's actually introducing some ways to actually implement data observability along the way. And I'm old enough to have been seeing data testing actually being introduced in IT, right? So
Hmm.
I remember back in the day, I was one of the enthusiasts about testing, right? And I was actually being flamed all the time by the old chaps telling me, dude, you have been hired to write code that goes in production, not some random test on the side that actually is taking away your time to create value. And this is
Right.
really the way people were reasoning 20 years ago. But I
Hmm.
think that in data, we have to learn the path. We have to learn this, that, oh, well, actually, I have to spend a little bit more time to log whatever I do with the data, so that I'm going to have some how to say, to something on my back, in a way supporting what I'm doing.
Okay, this is amazing. Thanks for that. Okay, another question for you. Your not from the audience, but from me. What would be your advice for those who are new to the data observability subject?
Um, well, data observability is quite new by itself, right? So it's not something
Exactly.
very old, right? Even though the way I define it and the way it needs to be introduced to me is actually taking things that have been introduced in IT or make sense already a few people, or I hope a lot, are already introducing in an intuitive manner in their code. To your point, where do they use already data observability or not? The answer
Yeah.
is probably yes, partially, but they don't know about it, right? Um, so I would say to those people willing to learn more, about data observability, I would start by thinking, depending who you are, about thinking what is your day look like, right, or your week look like. So
Exactly.
because data observability actually put a light on the problem that exists for years. I mean, really for years, right? So when I was in geospatial, I was working, I don't know, on satellite images to reposition some satellites to give commands to the fire worker to
Hmm.
send planes to actually pull down the real fire in this case, right? um, I was putting some barriers. I was doing a little bit of observability without knowing it back then, right? Um, so because I felt the pain if a fireworker is calling me and said, "What the heck is going on here? We don't get the right data. We're sending planes all over the places and nothing is working." Right. So imagine the stress that you have when you have in this situation. So you don't want to feel the stress. So think about, as a data engineer, how you deal with the data, how you see it being used, what kind of feedback do you get. As a
Yeah.
data analyst, scientist, when you get some bad data, what do you have to do? Who do you need to contact? What is the process of solving it? And when you think about it, right? So actually, you say, okay, now the problem is there and it's not new, right? And actually, it has to be known by, um, it should be also known by the manager, who need to talk, of course, to these people
Yeah.
and say, don't you hide some time that you have to go and check the data there and there? I'll say, yes, okay, yeah, I'm doing it because I'm super stressed about what may happen if my data is wrong. So this is one thing. So first, you think about your day, and then you're going to see the problem rising. And then, of course, if you want to have more information on how you can introduce it, you can go to our website, read about DAO, for instance, in order to understand how the heck this thing is going to help you.
Okay, this is very helpful information and great advice to those who are new to the data observability subject. So, thanks for sharing this gold, Andy. It's time for us to actually announce the winners for the annual subscription of 365 Data Science. We have 11 entries. All right, guys, let's do this fancy thing, and this is what I was exactly talking about. Let's see who the winner is. All the best to everyone who are participating today, and the winner is Manivan Vanan. Okay, Manivanan, congratulations. I'll reach out to you. You participated from YouTube, and all the best. Happy learning. You'll get an annual subscription from 365 Data Science. All right, Andy. This was fun chatting about data observability, and we learned a lot. I'm sure the audience did learn a lot as well. But if folks want to reach out to you, I know for a fact that you guys are starting a Slack channel very soon,
Yep.
and you will definitely mention that on the website. For those
Yep.
who want to visit the website, they can actually visit kensu.io. You can also request for a demo, so that would be interesting. And just want to learn where folks can reach out to you if they want to talk to you around data observability and much
Yeah.
more things.
So LinkedIn, Twitter, most probably are the currently where I'm spending a lot of time talking about this, right? So of course there is the website, as you said, and the
Yeah.
Slack channel that we're going to open soon for the community. We can also chat on GitHub. So we
Okay.
have some open source, agents that are all there where we can also discuss about different use cases and so on and so forth. Right.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thanks to everyone for joining in. Thanks, Daniel. I hope everyone enjoyed about data observability. There's a lot, definitely in 45 minutes, 47 minutes, we can't cover it all. But feel free to reach out to Andy. He'll be happy to, answer you any questions around data observability. All right, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Andy. It was a pleasure talking to you, and see you on version 2.0 on the Ravit Show.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you very
everyone. Bye
much.
bye. Have a good one.